In this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and look at some of the samples in the Corona SDK. So if you take a look at your welcome screen, on the right there's an option for samples. Go ahead and click on that. Now if you have a Windows computer, it's going to look a little different. So this is iOS, but on the Windows you should see something similar to this. So it should be a selection with all the different categories. So what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and go to the Getting Started folder, and we're going to go to Hello World. So once you have the main file selected in Hello World, go ahead and click Open, and you should get a very simple application showing Hello World. So this is text and an image being shown. It's about as simple as you can get of an application, and in section 6 we'll go through making one ourselves. So from here you can either go to File Open and go to the other projects, or you can just close this to get back to the welcome screen. So we're going to look at some of the other sample projects. So if you go from Samples Now to Getting Started, and we're going to do Time Animation. So this is a very simple video sample that allows you to drag a ball around and drop it. So go ahead and play around with it and see what it does. This is using the Corona physics system. It's a system built specifically for this project, so it's not the one that's integrated. It's not Box2D, which comes with Corona. We'll show some that are using Box2D later on. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the interface samples. Now there's plenty of samples here we're not going to cover. Feel free to look through them on your own. There's a lot of great stuff here, and you can actually look at the code of any of these projects once we get into the code editing section and get an understanding of how they work by reviewing their code. So from the interface we're going to go to Button Events, and this is going to show you the basics of creating a button in Corona. So we have 5 different buttons, and as you click on them you'll see a change up top, and this is showing you what has been done most recently. So if we click on button 3, it says that it's began its phase, then it's moved. Then when I let go, it'll say ended, so it shows that your click has finished. And you can actually, if you let go away from the button, it'll mark it as cancelled because it doesn't actually consider it the button being pressed. So let's go ahead now and take a look at List View in our interface folder. Do List View 3. So this is an example of having a clickable list of items. So this is just an example of some of the UI features available in Corona. And this is very easy to do in Corona. We'll go over some of this later. And then last in the interface, we're going to look at Drag Me. And this is an example of being able to move around objects on screen. So we have 3 squares that you can relocate by clicking and dragging. There's also a version of this tutorial meant for multi-touch, but since we're showing in just the simulator, there's not much you can do regarding the multi-touch. You'll also see whichever one was clicked on last becomes front. We'll show something similar to that later as well. Alright, so now that we're done with the interface ones, I want you to go to the graphic samples. And we're going to start with the fishies. So this is an example of objects moving around on the screen. So being able to display multiple images all moving around and bouncing off the walls. Also, if you click on them, it will change the color of the fish, which is using the graphics set coloring. And you'll see it actually fades. It doesn't change in one frame, but it slowly changes over. And that's using a transition, which we'll cover later as well. Next up, I want us to look at the flashlight in graphics. So this is showing us an example of an image mask. An image mask is basically taking a section of space and making it visible or invisible, basically being able to see through an image. And now we're going to go to the sprites folder in samples and take a look at the jungle scene. Now keep in mind, if you have any trouble opening these, you need to select the main.lua file and not just the folder. Usually the folder works, but sometimes on certain devices you need to choose the actual main Lua file. So this is an example of both scrolling graphics and animations. So you'll see here that the tiger and the alien both have multiple frames of animation. They appear to be moving in a solid state. This is using the sprite system, which we'll cover later. And then these images are doing what's called parallax scrolling. They are just moving across the screen, but they're moving at different speeds, giving the sense of a pseudo 3D environment. So let's go ahead and look at the physics now. So in samples, we're going to go to physics egg breaker. This is a great example of how easy it is to make a simple game. Egg breaker uses mechanics very similar to Angry Birds. So if you go ahead and click on the top, it will drop an object which will bounce off this edge and then hit this wall. And if the egg receives enough of a physics press, it cracks. So very similar to something like Angry Birds or Crush the Castle, you have the basic physics of objects bumping into each other. This is using Box2D, the built-in physics engine for Corona, and we'll cover that in a later tutorial. Lastly, I want you to go to this simple pool in physics. And this is a very simple tutorial of a pool table. So as you can see, you drag to shoot, release, it bounces the balls around. It's not the strongest example of pool. I mean, it looks like the physics aren't the best, but it does show the ability for Corona to make a super simple physics system in just under 100 lines of code. So, these are some of the sample projects. There's plenty more to look through. I would recommend checking out some of the other ones in graphics, as well as the getting started ones. In our next stage, we're going to go ahead and deal with editing an application, making changes to it, and seeing how it affects the application. And then we'll also get into creating our own Hello World.